Okay, so welcome to week 3 of Scipreneur Challenge. This week is one of my favorite weeks, as I said earlier, because it's really talking a little bit deeper about the target customer, as well as going into unique value proposition, which is one of my favorite areas and times, because it's when we take all the things we've discovered about the problem, the solution, of course, but also the customer and the market, and we start figuring out exactly how we can deliver benefits to our customers. And then once that's done, we need to figure out how to go to market. And that's the execution plan. That's how we take this and start our launching process with our products. So we're going to go through that tonight. Then I'm going to go over the homework. And like I said, I'm going to give you a couple of weeks to finish the homework because it's a little bit more extensive than what we had in the first 2 weeks, but it will put all these pieces together. So I don't think it's going to be very difficult or complex, but I am going to give you a couple of weeks to do that. And we'll talk about that during the homework section. Okay. All right, so target customer, just to kind of layer in some background for what we talked about last week, but also to give more evidence to what we talked about last week. Ultimately what you're trying to figure out is who's going to benefit from your product, right? That's what you're trying to figure out from the target market or the target customer. It can be, and we talked about this too, it could be someone who is consuming the product. Maybe it's a child and it's a cereal, their favorite cereal, but they're definitely not paying for the product. That would be the paying person or the customer, the client, and several different words of that, but the person that's actually handing over the money or some sort of value in exchange for your product or service, who is feeling the pain, and then who is the person that wants to gain something from utilizing this product too. And again, these are not always the same person. It can be someone downstream from you. It could be something that I'm the target audience for because I need to buy something for my partner, or buy something for my children, or buy something for my neighbors. But it's something, or my dogs, my pets, my animals, it doesn't matter. I'm the paying one, but there's someone else that's in pain, or there's something else I want to provide gain to. So it's not always an easy thing. Sometimes you have to find the person to influence that's got the money. And sometimes you have to find the person that influences the person that has the money. For example, tons of marketing over the years. We've all been susceptible to this when we were younger and going to our mothers, fathers, and whoever, grandparents, you name it, aunts and uncles, brothers and sisters, and said, I just saw this on TV. I got to have that for Christmas. I got to have it for my birthday. I want it, right? These are all things where I am going to now influence my parents or brother or sister, whatever it is, to go buy that product for me. That's why they market to children. The children are influencers of the paying customer, right? But the consumer is that child, and the child is the one who ultimately needs to be happy. If the child's happy, then ultimately the person that's bought it from is going to be happy too, because maybe they won't have to hear it anymore about wanting something. I know I've definitely done that with my kids. Bought something for them just to shut up, right? And that in its essence is a very small micro example of I was triggered to buy something. I had the motivation to do it, and I had the capability. I did it right then. Going back to the FOG behavioral model last week, I was influenced by something and I made a quick purchase and do that. That's the definition of end caps at Target, right? I mean, that's a marketing style. That's why they're there. That's why they call them end caps, and that's why they put them there, for impulse purchases. So when there's little micro transactions that are going through my head of what I want to do and what pain I want to get rid of or what gain I want to have, I can then impulse buy something real quick, right? So that's why that whole thing is designed that way. And when you start thinking about next time you go to the cash register and you see all the gum and candy, and sometimes you'll see things that aren't really making sense for your last minute purchases, but there's something they want to push, right? So when you start going through these things and going through the stores and the Targets and the Walmarts and the Walgreens and everything else, you might start noticing things a little bit differently when you start thinking about these areas and how they're trying to attract you to buy something from them. And that goes for Walgreens as well as the product owner. So other important things to know, and we talked about this just a few seconds ago when we talked about the investors, like knowing who they are, but knowing where they are and where they are with what they want to do, right? So geographically where they're located, but what other things are related to that too? How much access do they have, and how much access do you have to them? How much of an effort is it going to be to get your product to them, and how much of an effort is going to be to them to get your product back? I mean, both sides of those coins kind of have to be very well defined, and I'll show you a journey path here in a little bit that helps you do that. Those things have to be really well defined when something doesn't go right, right? When I send something and it doesn't fit, or I send something and it's broken transit, that person's going to want to send it back. That reverse logistics oftentimes is more difficult, more complex, and more expensive than just shipping it out there. But these are things I need to know when I'm attracting my customers. So if I'm going to get a beachhead customer, this is my first customer. My customer geographically is 1,000 miles away, and I have no customers closer, period, hands down, couldn't do it. Then yes, I'm gonna have to figure out how to get my product 1,000 miles away, and I'm gonna have to figure out a seamless and easy and frictionless way for them to get it back to me 1,000 miles. Maybe that's through partners, maybe it's through channels, maybe that's something I do just locally to them and manufacture. So it's delivered local and it can be handled local. I got to figure all those things out, right? And then I got to figure out how they get access to me also in the bigger picture. They find me online, they find me in, however, word of mouth, you name it. Access is multifaceted. It goes, obviously both ways. And we have to figure out where they are and how they get access to us and how we get access to them. What barriers are there between the product and us? What barriers are between the product and them? What barriers are between us and them? Right? That's what we have to also understand when we talk about those obstacles, when we're talking about the idea of discovery canvas, is what are the barriers that are going to stop me from getting to my customer or my product getting to my customer? What are the capabilities to buy my product? I mean, how are they going to do that? What forms are they going to take to do that? What are they buying? Tendencies and then influences we talked about too. I mean, we have those behaviors that are just kind of their typical tendencies. And we also have those influencers. I give you a couple examples of the slide before about the impulse buying or the children pushing them, or I said last week, your car breaking down, or just what your natural tendencies are. Like I go and get Starbucks every morning. I have to have a coffee. I'm just saying as an example, I have to have a coffee every morning to get my head straight, right? Well, the idea is that's my tendency. That's something I do every day. So who's going to feed into that? Starbucks and the other coffee makers out there. They're going to try to feed into me because they know I'm a coffee drinker and they can see that in my buying behaviors. Those are my tendencies and they want to play into those tendencies. Also, who's influencing me, how I'm influencing things, and how they can influence me. All are very important things to know when I'm trying to access the customer. This might all sound very complex, but again, y'all are all customers. So if you think about it in just kind of the flip the script fashion, it actually is not very complex when you start going, oh, okay, well, I do buy from them and they do send me a lot of stuff and it's very targeted towards me. Or I go to this place because this one place has the one thing I want and I don't care how far away it is, right? So you'll understand all your own buying behaviors. Sorry, I'm pulling away the veil here. When you start thinking about these things, and then it'll start clicking to you, right? And then that's how you turn it against the market that you want to go after, and you say, okay, this is how I'm going to do that for the customers that I want to try to attract. So speaking of attraction, this is a great way of kind of putting it all together in a very, very simple, small, I'll call it an infographic, but really it's just a graphic. And this is from HubSpot.com. They call it the flywheel. And I think it's probably the easiest and best way to show how a virtuous cycle can be utilized in your favor to bring on customer support and customers for a long time. So it starts at the top, right? So the very first element there is strangers. These are what, you don't know anybody that you're selling to, right? I'm not talking about just like who your strangers are that you just don't know. I'm saying your customers are strange to you. You don't know who they are yet because you haven't done anything to attract them, right? So this is first getting out there and understanding the market, but then this is also you trying to get in front of them some way, some mode to get their attention, right? You're trying to attract them. So when you do that and you've attracted them, similar to when you throw fishing line in the water and there's a worm on that or a bait on that, it's kind of swimming around and the fish are kind of checking it around. They've engaged a little bit, but now they're just prospects, right? They're prospecting around, trying to figure out if that's something I'm going to bite on or not, right? So the first thing is you kind of have to attract the strangers then become prospects. And you kind of see how it's not evenly aligned right there because they overlap a little bit. And this is when we have to start engaging them. So we have to start giving them an understanding of why they want to do business with us, or in this case, why that fish wants to bite that bait, right? Once we get to this, and it's not going to turn out great for the fish in my analogy in the end, but we'll let it go. So it will. The idea at the is like the next step is like, how do we delight the customer to the point where that customer is now paying us? So they're a full-fed customer, but then look what that next section is on the outer ring. They become promoters, right? And so if we keep attracting strangers and we keep engaging them through their prospect stage to the point where they start buying from us and become customers, and we continue to delight them, then they become promoters of our business. And essentially they're our sales force through word of mouth. And then all of that happens in effect in the middle of that, we get growth, right? So this is a great way to kind of like I said, a virtuous cycle of sorts where you're seeing how you can attract, engage, delight, and bring in strangers all the way into being promoters for yourself. It's a good way to kind of understand the methods that we'll use and the result that we want. This is really about the results we want. This is the perfect flywheel of sorts of what we want from our customer interactions and acquisition. All right, so we talked about the customer journey map as well. This is an excellent tool and you're not going to have to do a journey map. There's a few things in tonight's presentation that you will have to do, but most of the stuff I'm giving it to you just with reference, just so you can understand some of the backgrounds of being an entrepreneur and some of the tools we utilize to understand customers. This is a great tool for us to understand how a customer interacts with us. So that could be the very, very beginning of how we attract them and let them understand who we are. It could be after they bought a product from us, from the point when they buy the product to the point when the product is delivered. It could be how they sign up for our website. This journey map can be extremely long, so where it's like the entire life cycle of a customer's life as it interacts with your product or company, or it can be very short around a set area of opportunity or an area that you want to focus on of that experience. So it can be just around the sign up phase, the registration phase for a website or something like that, or it can be the whole thing. The idea is when you're looking at this, you can kind of see, and then you can also add in prompts, you can add in inputs and outputs, you can give a variety of different things like what scenario-based things, what happens. You can add in the reference cases and say, okay, if this happens, what happens with that? So this allows you to kind of do a lot of decision matrix kind of a discovery as well around how we can better the experience for a customer. And ultimately, that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to streamline the entire experience. You're trying to find all of the distractions. You're trying to remove all the requirements that are just not necessary because they were given arbitrarily by someone who felt they needed it for their own reasons. Maybe it was legal, maybe it was HR, doesn't matter. The idea is if it doesn't bring benefit to the customer, then it should be questioned. And if it's questioned and it doesn't fit the narrative of principles of why you're delivering to the customer, then it should be removed. And then what's left with that journey is a very clean, seamless, and should be frictionless experience for the customer, which then when you go back to it, that's where you're engaging them and delighting them, and they're becoming promoters. I mean, many of us talk about the products we buy all the time with other people because we're delighted by those products, as well as when we're not delighted and we're angry at them and we're upset and they've disappointed us, we also talk about them. So there is a vicious cycle of this as well. But like I said, we want to kind of keep on the virtuous side. All right, these two tools are an understanding of the journey of the flywheel and how to kind of engage your customers, and an understanding of the journey map on how they are experiencing friction with your product or service or offering or company. Is very important for that satisfaction, understanding satisfaction for a customer. Okay, one other thing that we wanted to talk about this week, and I mentioned last week, was crossing the chasm. I told you I'd show you this week, and here it is. This is a really easy way to illustrate the entire market for any product. And it's also a great way to understand where startups fail and die. It's kind of a valley of death, and it happens a lot of times for a lot of different reasons, but this one's from a sales and kind of marketing and adoption reason. You can kind of see it right there where the big red word there is the chasm. So everyone has probably been in each one of these categories for a different kind of product, right? So sometimes we find ourselves to be innovators, meaning we see a product, we see an app, we see a piece of clothing that's very cutting edge, very new, and maybe probably controversial, even clothing. I mean, have you seen those Croc boots things? I mean, they're kind of cool, but other people are like, those are crazy, right? So, but only the people buying those things are the truest of innovators. They don't care how rough it is. They don't care who cares what about it. They're going to be trailblazers. They're going to buy it no matter what. I have several products in my house that are just technologies that I've bought in basically version 1 because I wanted to have the first access to it. I was one of the first people to buy an Android tablet many years ago, right? When the iPad was just coming out and Android tablets were just kind of being talked about, and there's only a couple of people making them, and it was buggy to all get out, right? But I knew what I was getting into. And I was fine with that because I was going to give feedback and I was going to be part of their beta and all this stuff. And it was great. And that's really where you do these alphas and betas with these innovators, because they also can be very forgiving. They're not going to run off and say, my God, that thing was so horrible. I mean, take Tesla owners. Early Teslas had more problems than I mean, they had tons of problems, right? And they had misaligned body frames and all these different things. But these innovators and early adopters, they didn't care. They wanted access to the brand new EV car from Elon Musk that was going to be a fancy sports car type car and be like no one else has on the neighborhood. That's what they wanted. Those are the innovators, and then also the early adopters. Now, the early adopters, probably a better example for the later models of Tesla over the last few years. Those are the ones who kind of waited around, but because they wanted to get some of the bugs out. and they want to get a little bit more polished product, and they do care about the aesthetics and they do care about the customer satisfaction, and they don't want to keep going back and forth, but they're okay with some of the rough edges, and they're okay paying a little bit more than everyone else does. And they're okay with everything that relates to being just understanding what a minimum feature set is for them. So the minimum viable product, they're okay with that. These are the earliest of adopters. And you can see between the two of them, they make 15, 16% of the total market. Now, the difference between attracting an early adopter and someone in the early majority is significant. Also, the benefit of hitting into the early majority is significant because it's one of the two significant areas of the market, 34% of the market, right? So once we make that jump, we're a little bit in the gold a little bit, but we have to really keep moving forward and keeping our product there and keep delighting our customers. We can't rest on our laurels, but at that point, you're generating revenue almost by word of mouth, right? You've gotten into a market where people are liking it. It's a well-polished product. It's got a much larger feature set to it than the early adopters benefited from. You've heard all the information from the innovators and the early adopters, and even some of the early majority that haven't bought from you yet. You've integrated that into the product so you can entice them to use it. So maybe that first sliver, that first 5-6% of that early majority is still catered to that early majority, but that's your way to get into that. That's your beachhead, yeah, right? So when we talk about beachheads, there are several of them. That innovators are the ones that you're going to be getting to the earliest attention and awareness from, but they might not want to pay you anything for it because they feel like you're doing a benefit. The early adopters, that's when they're going to start generating some revenue. And you're going to feel like everything's going good, we're generating some revenue, but then it will plateau because you haven't figured out how to jump over that chasm yet. And that's really where growth techniques and growth tools can come to benefit you by understanding how to jump over that chasm and bring your product to a much larger group of individuals. And it might be talking with those, doing more discovery, and even catering to some of those in the early stages to penetrate that market. Once you're in there, you have to kind of keep your product evolving, but understand that most products will start to kind of taper off. And that's when you have to introduce new products or new feature sets. And you can kind of restart this whole timeline here, this bell curve. But if you don't, this is what's going to happen. You're going to start getting into the late majority. Those are the people that have like just waited around forever. EVs are, in this case, this would be the people buying them in like 2030, 2035. And then the laggards are the ones that you have to take away what is existing to them to give them the new stuff. Those are the people we don't try to market to at all. They're going to be the most resistant and the most difficult to get to. So usually the late majority and the laggards, we don't pay as much attention to. We still try to delight them and engage them, but we're really trying to launch new products and new evolutions of our existing product at that point. So we're looking at a new batch of innovators, a new batch of early adopters, and hopefully a new early majority to go penetrate as well. Okay, take a sip real quick before we jump into unique value proposition. So why is your business unique? But it's really, why is your business unique to your customers? And that's the important part. The reason to do business with you and not with other competitors, right? So there's two parts of it. There's unfair advantages and there's unique value propositions. The unique value propositions are the benefits you provide to your customers. The unfair advantages are the things that you have over your competitors. That being said, the UVP, the unique value proposition, and the unfair advantages also go hand in hand with each other, because obviously if you're providing very detailed, unique value to a customer and you're doing it better than anyone else, that is an unfair advantage, and you are going to take the market. And when I say unfair advantage, I'm not saying illegal. There's nothing that says anything to do with that. It's just like, I'm saying I have a patent on this and you don't. So it's unfair to you, but it's very fair to me, right? That's the kind of protections I'm talking about when I say unfair advantages. I have trademarks. I have clients that are very loyal to me. I have all these different, maybe it's exclusive relationships with vendors. These are all things that are unfair advantages, right? They're unfair to them, but they're fair to me. Now, unique value propositions can also be part of those unfair advantages, meaning if I have a large group of customers, I mean, try to take something away from TikTok these days, right? Try to take something away from Facebook. Try to take something away from Google. Even these software things that are trying to launch, I mean, the other versions are not going to take over some of these things, even when you embed different versions of AI into them as well, because they have such a huge customer base, right? So you can get to a point where your own customer base is your unique value proposition to the whole customers, because the community, and it's an unfair advantage. So these two can go hand in hand and often do. They certainly support each other. Okay, where is the unique value proposition? It's somewhere in the middle of this. What you do really well, what your competition does really well, and what your customer needs and cares about. Like if you can find the slice between what you can do better than your customers, but what they're doing, and you're doing it better, and then you're doing it better for your customers and their customers potentially, and you're also doing all of this extremely well about execution, then this is where that unique value proposition kind of relies in this Venn diagram. It's the overlap between all these two things, right? But it does take competition into account. And we're going to talk about competition here in a bit. There's one thing to be sure about. There's generally always competition. If there's no competition, that's probably the most difficult thing to try to launch into when there's no market whatsoever. So many times competition is a good thing. And in this case, it can help you find your own unique value proposition by knowing what your customer is doing and knowing what they're doing well. Competitors doing, and know what their competitors doing well. If I don't know what they're doing and I don't know how well they're doing it, I don't know how well I should do it and how I should deliver it to my customers. You see how these all parts kind of come together to deliver a unique value proposition. Okay, pains and gains are probably the best way to describe unique value proposition. So if you see the word benefits, if you take it to the next level of the meaning, we're talking about pains and gains, okay? Customers that are drawn to your business looking to gain something by using your product or service, something value added to their lives, or customers that are drawn to your business looking to have something causing them pain or leaving them lacking that will be alleviated by using your product or service. So it's something, I mean, very simple. I have a headache, I take an aspirin, I take a Tylenol, I take an ibuprofen, whatever my brand of choice is, and my headache goes away. That's what I'm doing. I'm literally asking for pain to go away. The benefit for me is pain going away. Therefore, I'm going to use that product because that product works best for me when I have a headache, right? It's not necessarily a gain. It's just getting rid of some pains, literally. But if you also can think very across, in a much larger aspect of the figurative, like pains and gains, I want to be happier if I buy this product, or if something is blocking me from doing something. By buying this product, I can get further down the road so I can alleviate my frustrations, right? So pains and gains are always a good way to break down where the benefits are to a customer. And getting to that means you need to do your discovery to understand who they are, what your prototypical kind of customer is, and what their motivations are, influences are, and everything else. And to do that, there's some tools. And we had this one up in our deck last week as well, and I'm going to bring it back because I'm going to add another canvas to this. So there's two options in this canvas. But I think they do, in my opinion, they do a little bit different things. And I usually kind of start with this one and then go to the next one. Okay, so this one to me does a good job of being able to illustrate the influences, everything that's around the prototypical customer that I will either have to overcome or manipulate or remove or add to. But these are the things that influence them on a daily basis. And so just to go over it again, at the top, left and right. On the left, we have our bad things, and on our right, we have our good things. And I'm looking at it here, so that's my left and right. The negative trends are the things at the very top that are way out of their control. I mean, this is rain, this is storms, this is being sick, it's the epidemic, it's a pandemic, it's things that are just well beyond their control, that are negative in their lives from the environment, that are influencing them in a negative way. Conversely, just taking the weather patterns, it's sunny outside, it's a nice, cool, crisp day, I can get out with my dogs and walk or ride a bike or be with my friends, go out and sit on the patio. These are all positive trends. These are things that are going to influence me the right way. You got to think of these in two different ways. Think of it kind of like what your mood is a way you're going to dictate what you might buy. If I'm in a negative mood and someone presents something to me, I'm going to take a negative approach to it. If I'm in a positive mood and something presents something to me, I'm going to take a positive approach to it. So these large scale kind of environmental influences are very, very important because they can dictate my mode, they can dictate my mood, right? Then the next level down is kind of more a little bit interpersonal, but it's not, it's personal, not interpersonal. These are the things that are much closer to me. These are my daily job. These are my family. These are the things that have influence over me. I have somewhat control over, but not total control over. I can leave my job, but I might not be able to change how my job affects me if I stay there, because I can't change the responsibilities necessarily unless I go to another job, either in the same company or to another company. So it's going to influence me one way or another, both positively and negatively. I have very small children. I mean, if I did, I don't anymore. If I had very small children and there was lots of them, they were all around, they were running around all day, and I was trying to get work done, those would be very large headaches, right? I mean, it was cause a lot of headaches, a lot to deal with. So the professional and work related issues on the headache side, and then the opportunities on the other side, they will influence me again. Again, I have control. I can remove myself from some of these things. I can change them. I can do different things to control them, but they still will have an impact. Then we get to the interpersonal stuff at the bottom. These are my interpersonal fears and my hopes. This is the shadow or part X or whatever you want to call it, the thing that comes from the back of your head that makes you not hopeful about something. The other shoes dropping. It could be a previous experience, or it could be just some other thing that you're afraid of. These are all natural. And sometimes you can control those. Many times you really can't. Sometimes it's easier to control the weather, and if you think about it, than your own thoughts. And sometimes the idea is these are very interpersonal, and sometimes they can influence you in one way or another. Getting to know your customers to understand some of these other things, which is sometimes difficult to do, especially when you get down to the fears and hopes. But when you start at the top and start layering it down and saying, okay, we're going to talk about the environmental stuff, then we're going to talk about the stuff that would possibly be around this person, then we're going to talk about what would be affecting them interpersonally. So if we're saying our target customer is mothers between the ages of 25 and 55 with 4 kids with a disposable income of $45,000, that works 2 days, and 2 of the 4 kids are in daycare, so on and so forth. I can keep going, right? I can kind of draw the picture of what my prototypical customer is going to be. And once I've got that one identified, I can also do a pretty good job of extrapolating what all these influences could be. And if I can't, guess what I do? I go talk to customers. And I find more and more customers that are like the ones I want to target. And I ask them these questions. What causes you a headache at work? What causes you the headache at home? What alleviates that headache at home? What alleviates that headache at work? These are open-ended questions that allow me to pinpoint value. And that's what this canvas is all about. So if you can't get all the answers here, then you have to go do customer discovery. And once you've done that, you come to this tool, which I like to use too, which very clearly just dictates your value proposition. You can take what you put on this tool and put it directly into your deck. So you put over here to the left, you put your products and your services. Everything your products and your service will do at a very high level, not your feature set level, at a high level. And then on the right side, you put what the job is to be done. So we have the circle representing the customer and the square representing my product. Okay. So on the circle side and the wedge all the way right, it says job to be done. I put the job to be done. So I'm hoping that my product and solutions are going to do the job. Then staying in the circle and utilizing the information I found through customer discovery and possibly, hopefully, probably the page before it, which was the other persona canvas. I'm going to start listing in what I know now is to be the gains that I can provide and the pains that I can alleviate. Over here on the circle on the right, I should be able to say with fairly good clarity, these are the pains, these are the gains, and this is the job that's to be done that's expected by my customer. Then coming over here, if I need to adjust anything to their product and services in the triangle over the left of the square, I do that compared to what I've seen over there, the job to be done, right? So I say, okay, they had 4 jobs. I have 3 of the 4 jobs. I need to add 1 more in order to get to the job to be done that they're expecting. And then when I do that, on my left-hand side, and I do like to change the phrases, even though you can just kind of say, well, we're going to get rid of these things and give them these things. I like to turn these into declarative statements of how my product is actually going to provide that gain. This part of the product will provide this, which will give them a gain. This part of the product will alleviate this, which will give them alleviation of this pain. So between the ones we've done before, the discovery, and this canvas right here, I should have a clear understanding of what the pains and gains are, and therefore I can draft out exactly what my value propositions are, and I put that into my deck. And then speak to that when I'm talking to people. Tell me more about your customers. So I can tell you a lot about my customers. Here's the pain points. And then I can say, and here's where my solution is going to come to bear to alleviate those pain points. Right. So this gets down to the nitty gritty about what they need and what you're going to provide. And the next step is simply asking them how much they're willing to spend, or figuring out what the price point is, because now you know what they need. Okay, like everything else, we have a discovery process for this. First, research. I mean, that's the nature of the game of everything we do in these cohorts, and everything you do on probably on a daily basis as well. Conduct your market research, identify the needs and pain points for your target markets. I mean, everything I showed you is a lot of different tools and a lot of different methodologies to go and think about the market, think about the customer, but it doesn't change the fact you have to go out there and do the research. You have to go out there and figure out what the pain points and the gains are and everything else, and then validate those by talking and doing more research in your customers. You need to analyze the competition. Over in the right-hand bottom corner is a matrix that shows, company A, B, C, and D, who does what, who does things well. My product, my companies, you can see it, all the green checks over there. See, my company does everything perfectly. You wouldn't say perfectly, but you get the point, right? But I have to understand how my competition is doing what they're doing and how well they're doing. It goes back to that diagram we talked about earlier. If I understand what they're doing, then I can understand what I need to do. If I understand how well they're doing for the customers, then I understand how I need to do it better, right? So analyzing the competition is very, very important. Identify your strengths. I mean, this seems obvious, but this also drives to, or gets to the point of like what you need to protect, what the important parts that you need to kind of get into, what we talked about, that unfair advantage side of things. So analyzing your capabilities, technology, your expertise, your resources, that's your team, and all the unique advantages you might have, and making sure you protect those and identify those strengths and protect those areas, right? So the idea here is to understand where your strengths are, but obviously also understand where your weaknesses are and protect those weaknesses. Document, document, document. We talked about the canvases. These are tools for you to turn illustration into, or detail into, describe however you want to do it. And there's lots of different forms and ways you can do it. But the idea is to continue to document your UVP so you understand it, your team understands it, and this is a living document. These are the key benefits to your customer from your technology or from whatever you're trying to deliver. And it's going to change over time. So you need to keep documenting your UVP and going through the discovery process over and over again, iteratively, to make sure you're continuously responding to your customers' needs. And then the last thing is also testing and refining and over and kind of rinse and repeat, right? We're going to continue to test. We're going to continue to get feedback. Like I said earlier, once you've kind of taken a good stab at what you believe is the case, the only way to validate that is to go talk to the customer. Or if you've gotten through 75% of it and you just can't get through the other 25%, then you need to go talk to your customer, get that other 25%, and then also validate what the other part that you did have, right? So the idea here is make sure you're testing everything and refining it, and then, like the first one was, documenting it and then iteratively building upon it, making adjustments, and continue to add more and more value. I will caution you though, you can basically drown your customers in value too. I mean, you can just basically try to provide them with so much value they don't see anything unique about it, or they don't see anything that can kind of pinpoint, or they start feeling like it's too much for them to handle, or they feel like it's going to cost them too much. So you really do have to make sure you refine it to a point that makes sense to the customer at the time you're selling it to the customer as well. Okay, so we've talked about target customer, we've talked about tools to understand the market, we've talked about the canvases for personas and value propositions, we've talked about unique value propositions, pains and gains, and we've talked about the UVP discovery process. All right, so all of that, layering that in behind the problem, solution, customer, is going to give you that first almost half of the presentation that we're going to be pitching, right? And it's going to make up a lion's share of the core of your narrative. But also a core of your narrative is this kind of this tail end piece before we start getting into really understanding the other parts that an investor wants to see, which we'll talk about in the next couple of weeks when we talk about finances and stuff like that. The other part of this is like, how are you going to get your product to market? And everyone in this cohort's really going to have to put some thought into this over the next couple of weeks. It shouldn't be overly complex, and I really do recommend you going back to the intellectual property holders, seeing what they thought, but really also challenging it as well, seeing what else you can get out there. The idea of this challenge is to not just go with what they think, but to either validate that and improve upon it or evolve it, or come with something different, right? Or prove them wrong or prove them right, however you want to think about it. The idea is to get an understanding and build a narrative that will help them and help their products get to market. And that's why we need to also add in this layer in this part of like, how are you going to go to market, right? So that's what we call a GTM, or go to market. Okay, so what is a GTM strategy? It's an action plan. It's your execution plan. It's a blueprint. There's all sorts of adjectives you can put toward this, or different words you can put towards this, but it specifies how a company will reach target customers and achieve competitive advantage. The purpose is to provide a blueprint for delivering a product or service to the end customer, taking into account such factors as pricing and distribution. So this is really how we're going to target them, but this is more into the detail of like the true modes. We're going to target them through going to conferences. We're going to target them through direct marketing. We're going to target them through web-based marketing, search engine optimization, AI campaigns, you name it. This is the action plan of how you're going to attract those customers to your product, that flywheel, going to the first thing of building awareness, making sure they understand who you are. And that first part of that is building the go-to-market strategy as the action plan of what you're going to do that. This is a blueprint. This is the one that kind of describes everything that you need to do in order to hit that market. So first step, as of everything, again, discovery process. Identify the target market. For life science and healthcare, consider factors such as the patient population or healthcare providers. We talked about this earlier when we talked about the two parts or the two prongs of how you can approach your product. There's the big picture kind of tool mechanism kind of thing, and then there's the very specific area of exposure that you want to bring awareness of. It could be the beachhead. So there's all sorts of different ways to kind of slice and dice the market, and you need to understand what area you're going to identify as the target for that market. So we talk about target customers, we talk about prototypical customers and kind of theoretical customers, and we validate those with customer discovery. Now we got to start talking about, okay, now we know how they're motivated. What's the mode that we're going to take to identify the market they're in and identify the right way to approach them in that market? What mode of communications are we going to go with to do that? Conduct more market research on the other, what your customers are doing, as well as, what your competitors are doing. Understanding how they're marketing out there, what the how they're getting out to the customers, and understanding every part of what could be influencing them. Developing a marketing plan, a very simple, clear narrative and value proposition that resonates with your target audience. And this is the one part of this whole discovery part that I'm going to need y'all to focus on and be part of your homework, which is identifying just a high-level statement around what your marketing plan is. And I'm going to get y'all to take a stab at it. There's no wrong answers. I'll talk about this a little bit more in the homework here in a few slides. But the idea is that we need to kind of build a small narrative around your marketing plan. So as you're getting into your kind of go-to-market part of this process and getting an understanding of how best to market your product, and this is the case of like selling your product or marketing your product, we'll have to come up with a clear narrative that includes part of the value proposition that resonates with the target audience to give an understanding of what the marketing plan is here. So on the final pitch, we'll talk about a high-level go-to-market strategy. For this process, this is talking about a very in-depth marketing plan, a clear narrative, a very approach that resonates with your customer. Obviously, it's one of the next marketing tactics that are most effective for reaching your audience. You should consider a budget, resources needed to execute your plan, how well you measure, etc. your marketing efforts. This go-to-market strategy is something that the investors want to see, and they also want to see that you're going to spend money on. Beyond talent and other resources that you'll need to go to market, this is the area of marketing and sales that's very important for the investor to see that you have a clear and concise plan on how you're going to get your product out there to the customers. If you don't have that narrative and that narrative doesn't fit well with everything else you're saying, they're not going to believe you have a plan to get out there. And if you don't have a plan to get out in the market, then why would they be investing in you? They might just rather buy the product from you and do it themselves or find somebody else to do it. So this is a very imperative part of understanding what part you need to put in there in the sales pitch of saying, hey, this is how I'm going to market our product. This is how I'm going to penetrate the customer base and get my message out there, what my product and services does. Business development. This is probably something after several decades of doing entrepreneurship, I probably do business development more than anything else, maybe even more than product development these days. And this is about building relationships, go-to-market strategies. This is where you bring in your conversations around your partners. So when you talk with your IP holders, if they have any partners, if they're doing anything with other universities, this is a good time to layer that in. What business development has gone on for your product? What business development that you would like to do for your product to help your product get to market? And a big part of that is what partnerships you're going to do, what stakeholders you're going to bring to the table. And in many cases with healthcare, what the third parties are going to be doing, and what the insurance providers are going to be doing, what the hospitals are going to be doing, what's the difference, of getting between me and my patient when I have to go through, and difference in marketing when I have to go through several layers to get there. Do I do direct marketing to my patient, or do I do direct marketing to the physician? Still, the physician is 2 or 3 steps from where I am, and maybe the hoops I have to jump through between other parties. So the idea is, where do we market, right? So also, where do we start building business relationships? Because there might be other people that can get us to that part. So part of a go-to-market strategy that I had in a recent deck for a company we're utilizing, they're a very small medical device product. They know they're not going to build a huge business, but fortunately for them, their product could be used on several tens of millions of people at any given time around the world. It's a very viable product, and we're hoping that it launches in a very, very big way. Because of how many people could actually use this, because it's in the respiratory distress issue area, and there's so much respiratory distress issues these days, hospitalizations occurring from that. Because of that, this team knows they're not going to build a big, huge company like Abbott or B&D or something like that. They're going to build a company that gets partnered or bought. I mean, that's kind of the intention there. I think they'd rather partner first. And what they would do is then partner with a much larger company that has other products in the market, non-competitive products in the market, or similar products in the market, or complementary products in the market, however you want to think about it, or however they have it, and then build a partnership to deliver your product through their product. So if I was going to build a product that was going to be used in the hospital and I needed to be packaged, I might go to Cardinal Healthcare and have them packaged up in their burn kits or their surgical kits. And my product would just be as part of their whole larger contract with that hospital. That's the way I'm going to get my product to the market. I'm actually not going to have to market to any customers. I'm just going to market to the business partners of my customers, and they're going to carry it. So in this case, I probably would have to prove to the physicians that they need my product, and then they would tell the administration of the hospital that they need my product. The administration of the hospital would talk to Cardinal Healthcare, and Cardinal Healthcare would approve getting the product, and the product would be, the product team would talk to me about my product, and I would take my product and put it in their bundle, and then so on and so forth, and that's how it would be delivered to the end user, the physician on the other end that's going to utilize my product for some sort of patient care. Right? And that was a very complex thing that took a ton of business development and relationship building to get to market. That's why it's all part of this go-to-market strategy. So know that it might not be the best route to try to do everything on your own. And this is why business development is so important. Regulatory approval. These days, in general, no matter what you're doing, you might need some sort of regulatory approval, especially if we're talking about healthcare, patient healthcare, or anything else that's going to be implemented in or around a patient. That needs to go through FDA. It needs to go through 510K. We have lots of resources in the state of Tennessee to help companies and research institutions go through that process. If you're not going to have a product go through FDA, then you're not going to get that product to a patient. That process involves clinical trials. It involves a lot of testing. It can be several years in the making. And in some cases, it can be abbreviated very, very quickly if someone says, okay, you've gathered enough data, now go to market. Also, you can get a variety of different special uses, which we'll talk about when we talk about the federal and regulatory stuff next week, like emergency use and different things to get you into abbreviated forms of the FDA process. But just know that there's lots of regulatory. If you're talking about some other things like transportation, it might be FAA or DOT. I want to give you some examples here of just other regulatory things. EU, electrical type regulatory things, especially in the European Union, lots of different things there. You might have regulatory approvals just by certain geographic zones. Germany, France, England all have very specific healthcare and workplace environmental type things that your product has to apply to or measure to their standard, or you're not going to sell it anywhere in their borders. Right. So these are all things that you have to apply to and make sure that you get approval from. Now, once you've done that, you can launch your product. You've got your marketing plan, you understand your customers. Now, nothing's going to guarantee success here, but if you look back of everything we've built, we have a clear understanding of our problem. We have a clear understanding of what the solution is. We have a clear understanding of the customers. We have a clear understanding of what the market is, the beachhead. We have a clear understanding of what the unique value propositions are. We have a clear understanding of what the go-to-market strategy is. So we have a clear understanding of who our partners are through business development and everything we need to do to get that product. We understand the whole journey. Now's the time to launch, right? The only part is now we have to also figure out how much money we're going to make and how much money we need to get invested in us to be able to do that. But you should be very close to having a plan of attack to launch your product in the market with a timeline and everything goes along with it by the time you get to this part of the discovery process for go-to-market. Measure, measure, measure. Everything needs to be measured. Everything needs to evolve. This is a pretty self-explanatory slide. The better you are at measuring yourself, the better you are at being effective and efficient, the better you are at delivering results to your customers. The happier your customers are, the more they are delighted, the more they continue paying you. right? So being kind of resting in your laurels, we knocked it out of the park first time, everything's great, customers love us, will only last so long. And then it'll deteriorate rapidly. And you won't be able to get it back because you've broken the trust. Because at that point, the customers want to see more and more and more, and not just the same old, right? So in order to do that, you have to keep paying attention to what they say. You got to keep measuring your own self to make sure you're doing everything very effectively and efficiently to deliver the levels of customer satisfaction that they're expecting. You have the best product in the world, and they expect it in 2 weeks, and it takes 2 years. It ain't the best product in the world. That's what I'm saying. Okay, that was it for the night. I hope we covered another layer of good material for you to get a better understanding of what we've kind of layered over and over into each part of this. So at this point, I think it's time we start putting it together, right? So we have the problem and the customer solution, which we've already talked about. We've seen a couple, we've talked with a couple examples tonight. Let's talk about the unique value proposition, and let's talk about the go-to-market strategy. Super high level in the go-to-market strategy. It can be 1 or 2 sentences. We're going to go to market this way. This is how we're going to penetrate the market. There's really not any wrong answer for the GTM for go to market right now. I just want to see some sort of logical thought on how you would go to market in your overall kind of 120-second elevator pitch. So this is kind of me saying you got 2 minutes to deliver in a concise fashion these 5 things. We've already done 3 of them. And so I'm just layering in 2 more, which should be easier to understand as you get to the customer. And then building a go-to-market strategy can be fairly simple and straightforward. And I've given you 2 weeks to do it. So next week, we'll talk about regulatory and FDA and a few other things to kind of give us a break on thinking around the business side of things and talking more about the bigger picture of regulatory type stuff. We'll cover some of this ground again, just to make sure it's solid. But then the week after, we'll start talking about delivering that 2-minute pitch back to us. And then we'll start building upon that as we end up in the last 3 weeks of this process, building towards your full deck, of which you'll have 7 minutes to pitch. So at least 7 minutes. It might be 7 or 8. I'll see how we all are going. I actually haven't told them how long it's going to be yet or how much I wish it was, but usually it's around 7 minutes. But we're going to kind of stick with that, and we'll see how it goes once we get into pitch practice. This will help. This 2-minute kind of pitch will basically be the first 2-3 minutes of your presentation. I mean, you'll probably be able to expand upon it a little bit when you're doing your presentation, but it'll certainly be a lion's share of what you're talking about in the first half of your pitch. So in essence, we're already going to be layering in the first part of the narrative right now in these weeks that we've been working, and we'll put the other parts on it over the next few weeks. That's the class for tonight. Got out even earlier than usual. I was going through a lot of stuff rather rapidly, but hopefully you got a lot out of it. If there's any questions, we can certainly spend a little time doing that, or we can give you some of your time back as well. I'm going to remove the pen, so this is not just taking up full screen. Is there any questions or anything that you'd like to talk about tonight, or anything about what we worked on, or anything we're going to work on in the next few weeks? Okay. Well, I will be uploading this recording to YouTube tomorrow after it renders. I do think I need to check on last week's too, because I never went back to do that. So I'll do that as well. And then the material will be in the decks. I encourage you to reach out to your IP holders to validate any information you have or anything you need. I'll reach out to UTK about the BioFace one, and then we'll just keep moving forward. If you got any questions, you know how to reach me.